Welcome to our Noel class, which is going to be a free class for everyone. This is a really fun, quick piece for you to make. It uses our wood cutouts, which are available at Shelley Parker Art, but I'll talk a little bit about those more as we go along. But it's goes together really, really quickly. It's a great piece to sell. I have sold a different version of this design many times. It's been very popular on my Etsy store, and I'm excited to offer this one too. The cutouts are available to fit a 5x7 or an 8x10, so you get those choices. But let's just jump in and make this piece. Maybe I'll show it to you first. Do you want to see it first? I'll go ahead and add in this camera. This is the live camera. Just to show you the piece. I haven't added resin yet. I actually have an order over my shoulder here that I need to resin today. So I will be adding resin to this piece just a little bit later. And then I'll come back and show you the finished piece. Once resin is on it, it just adds such a sparkle and really finishes it off just beautifully. So let's go ahead and jump into the videos that I've filmed. I like to do my classes filming the videos because there's little drawing times that need to happen. So showing you the video just helps make it go a little bit quicker. But the first thing I'm doing with my wood cutouts is using a little bit of alcohol. I just use a paper towel and I just wipe off all of the edges with the alcohol just to clean up a little bit of the residue that the laser can leave. Because the background on this piece is white, I want to make sure that I don't have any residue that the resin could spread around. So I ended up getting a Q-tip that worked a little bit easier. These letters are fragile, so you want to handle them carefully. I love these little pointed Q-tips. I use them a lot on my art. I'm going to be editing this file a little bit. The edges of some of the letters are so thin that the laser has a little bit of trouble. So if you order this wood cutout, your cutouts will be a tiny bit thicker. You won't be able to notice, but where the laser cut them, it kind of just took away that pretty edge on the letters, and you'll probably see it a couple of times as I turn them around, especially that little serif edge on the E. I did go ahead and wipe off the backer because I'm going to be using this backer to place the letters on our piece. And I just didn't want anything residue from the laser to get on the piece from that. So I make my substrates and I always use wood. I really like wood. I like how the wood, I don't know, I think the wood, it's a great substrate if you're adding glass and resin because it's real sturdy, but I think it just adds a warmth too. And so I don't use canvas. All of my pieces are on wood. I'm doing the same thing. I end up cutting my base substrate on the laser too, so I'm just giving that a quick wipe as well. And then I make my frames too. So for my piece, I end up completely doing the backer and staining the frame separately. It's just a little bit easier. If you're buying a 5x7 substrate, you can tape off the back and stain the edges and then paint in the insides. But you could, of course, do this on a canvas too. So here I'm just putting on some GAC 100 on the backer. This is just a sealer, particularly because this background is white. I want to make sure that there's no chance of any oils or any color from the wood itself coming through and permeating that white background. So I'm just quickly painting on this sealer. It's just a kind of a barrier between the wood and the paint. I'm also doing it on all the letters. You probably don't have to do it on the letters if you don't want to. The letters will be, for mine, I'm making my letters red. So red is a nice dark color, and there's not going to be anything coming through that you'll be able to see. Let's go forward a little bit. When we're working with the wood cutouts, they can kind of bounce around a little bit. So what I'm doing here is just taking a piece of painter's tape, and I turned the edges back so that I can stick it onto my work surface, but the sticky side is up. So now I can place my letters down on this tape and not have them bouncing around so much as I paint them. I'm not going to be painting the O because that is going to be the wreath that we're putting in the middle. And for this piece, I just put out just a couple of colors. Usually when I paint big pieces, I love to use my glass palette, but we only need a tiny bit of paint for these letters. If you haven't seen the videos that I've posted about how I set up my palette, go check that out. I have the palette that I'm currently working on. I've been using since August, and it's so nice to be able to come down, just pull out the palette and get to work. I don't have to set it up each time, so it's a big time saver. So I'm going to be mixing just a pretty red, not so primary as the pyrrole red that you see there. So I'm just putting out a little bit of the pyrrole red, a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of quinacridone magenta. I ended up putting out still too much paint. It really just takes just a tiny bit. I'm just going to mix in a little bit of the burnt umber and a little bit of the quinacridone magenta just to darken the red down, make it a little bit more maroon. And even on these little letters, I still like to have just a little bit of variation. So I didn't want it to be just a flat one color. It's freezing down here today. I'm not ready for winter. I like the Christmas pieces. I like decorating for Christmas, but I'm not a fan of the cold. So you'll see just how quickly these come together. It's they're really, really fast. And all of the wood cutouts, we have a lot of wood cutouts to choose from, and they really are a time saver. My customers and the students in my classes just really love using the wood cutouts. If you're a selling artist, it's a huge time saver. So I'm coming back in and just adding some lighter red in some spots. I'm not really being particular about where it is, just adding in a little variation. The thing I do want to make sure of is that I get a good coverage of paint here. Anyone who's painted with red before knows that the first coat that you put on is a little bit, can be a little bit streaky. So I come over the piece just a couple of times to make sure that that everything is nicely covered. I'm going to go forward a little bit, just slowly so that you can see. So now that the GAC 100 has dried on everything, I'm going to coat my backer with white gesso. And I like the white gesso. I've talked with a couple of friends who've used some different types of gesso, and have heard some people say that they didn't really like theirs. I think that in something like this, the brand makes a difference. So I use the golden. I use golden paints mostly, so I like having the gesso that is the same color. I'm sorry, the same brand. But I really like this gesso, and I think that it does a really good job of um, really covering really well on the first coat. But because this is going to be the final background, I want to make sure that I get a nice smooth finish. So I'm going to be doing 2 coats of it just to make sure it's perfect. A little side note here, I'm dipping my brush into the actual container of the gesso. So if you do that, make sure that you don't have any water in your brush. You don't want to introduce water into the main container of any of your paints. It can cause mold and all kinds of bad stuff to happen. I'm going to go forward a little bit again. I end up blow drying it just so that I can move along and get to the second coat. And I did the coats as I was painting, horizontal and vertical, just to make sure that I had a really nice coverage. So now I'm going to go ahead and stain my frame. This is how I build all of my art pieces that I do like this. Um, if you're staining, don't do what I'm doing. Um, it's better to stain in an area away from where you're painting. I just have my camera set up in here, so it's easier for me to film it this way, but stain can be a mess. So I held up a little sponge. I don't know what they're called. Like I call it like the little dauber. I love those little sponges. I reuse them a lot. You can see that it already has stain on it. And the gloves too, you can see they're already dirty. I reuse the gloves a lot as well. I'm such a saver. So I'm just going to quickly um, press the stain around and cover the entire frame. As I nail this on, it's going to set on top of the backer that I just painted. So the back the back part of this frame isn't going to show at all. So what I do is there's always one side of the frame that's a little bit prettier than the other. So I always choose the prettier side to be facing up. No matter how much you try to make it perfect, when you nail the frames together, there's just always a side that's not as pretty. The stain that I'm using here is dark walnut. In my Etsy store, I offer my stains in a few set colors, and I like doing it that way. That way I can just um, have on hand just the stains that I like to offer. So you just kind of slosh it on and then use a paper towel to come back in and wipe off all of the excess. I think staining is one of my favorite things to do. It just makes the wood come alive. It looks so pretty. We go forward a little bit. Here I'm just wiping that off. Again, I just use a paper towel. I don't ever have any trouble just using a paper towel. So I'm just going to wipe off all of the edges and then leave it to sit. I ended up touching the wet paint, and so you can see a little white paint that got on the inside of my frame, which goes back to what I was talking to before. If you can stain, an area away from where you're painting, it's so much better. I ended up getting out a Q-tip and a little bit of alcohol and rubbing on that area to fix the problem, but it's hard to film for you guys and have everything in one spot. Trying to see where the edge is so I can fast forward a little bit. So a caution about staining. If you are staining and then adding resin, make sure that you're waiting at least 24 hours before you add resin. The stain that gets in those corners of the frame stays wet longer. And I have had issues before where I've added resin and some of that stain has seeped into my piece. So make sure that you're giving your stain at least 24 hours after you stain to really dry in those areas. So let's go ahead and go to the next video. This video I filmed this morning. So here's the whole piece nailed together. I use a sander on mine to do the nice beveled edge on the back. I like that finished detail. I will go back in once the resin is done and stain the back of it as well. This wood had an interesting little blemish in the wood. I never worry about that. I kind of like some of those natural blemishes that can be in wood. So I was just pointing out that to you. So here are all of my letters. You can see just a little bit of the variation of the paint colors there. My backer actually slid perfectly into my piece. So I'm just using this as a guide to space out the letters, and it's a really handy trick to use. I talk about it in some of the other classes that I have where I use letters like this. Using that backer is a good trick. So there I was showing 2 glues. I like the Star Bond glue a lot. For this particular piece, I want to resin it today. I want to resin it today, but I also want to be careful because even though the backer is very, very handy to use, that super glue type Star Bond glue, you want to make sure that you don't glue your backer down. That would be, after all of that work that you've done, that would be a bummer. So if you are using the Star Bond glue, Just make sure to use a very, very tiny bit. You can see on the school glue that I'm using that I just am just adding glue to that one thicker area. And then I'm wiping some of it off. Again, because I want to resin it today, I want this to dry pretty quickly. So I just want a little bit of glue. This glue is just here to keep everything in place as I add resin. I just don't want it floating around before the resin sets. So this is just a little insurance policy to keep those letters exactly where I want them. So now that I have them all in place, I'm just going to lift that whole backer out. And they're perfectly spaced. There was just a little bit of some dust that came from the backer, so I'm just going to take a minute to clean that up. If you did use the Start Bond glue and you're cleaning up an area like this, make sure you keep your paintbrush away from any of those glued edges. I have ruined more brushes than I care to admit because I get in to clean up an area and that Star Bond gets on the brush. You saw me there take a little bit of the painter's tape. I just grabbed some of the painter's tape that was left over from holding down the letters. The tape, I used the tape quite a bit on this piece. So now we're going to build the pretty wreath that we're going to put in place of our O. And I love this faux pine. I got it at Hobby Lobby, I'm sure. It comes in this great big roll. I've used it for so many pieces, and I'm still on the very first roll that I ever bought. So I'm just going to take scissors and I just lay them against that wire that's in the center. And I'm just going to cut off a bunch of these little green sprigs that I'm going to use as pine. Like I said, I've used this many times before, so I know it does well with resin. So I'm not worried about it with resin at all. If you're using something different that you've never added resin over, do a test because sometimes things do bleed under resin, and you don't want that surprise. It is staticky though, so every time I move my fingers around, it's stuck on me and stuck on the side of the frame. So I just want to be careful as I'm going through here to make sure that I don't have any hidden pieces of this, and I'll be watching again as I resin to make sure that none of those pieces float out from some hiding space around those letters. So you can see how quickly you can pull this together. I just put a big pile of it where I wanted this wreath to go, and then just use a paintbrush to begin to shape my little wreath. And then I can bring the O back in just to eye it, just to see if it's about the size that I want it to be. Hi, Connie. Thanks for coming in. How are you doing today? So I'm going to use green seed beads and some red seed beads. I like this variation of green that I just held up. It has some dark green, it has some translucent green, it has kind of a moss green, and everyone who has seen my classes knows that I love that variation. I think the more ways we can add variation, it just adds a lot of interest to our pieces. So I'm not worried on these. The beads are so small. I'm not worried at all if the whole of the bead faces up. And then I'm going to put in just just a couple of the red seed beads. I like these. They're more translucent, a little bit glassier, so they're very pretty. Yay! I'm so glad that you caught me live too. It's so fun to have visitors and not be sitting alone. I'm doing good. I'm freezing. It's cold here. I said a little bit earlier that I love decorating for Christmas. I love Christmas, but I'm not ready for the cold. Luckily, I have dogs that love the cold, so they're like they want to be out on the deck and they want they want the cold. So it's just a little fiddly now. Just getting the brush back in there, making sure that the shape is what you want it to be. From my vantage point where I'm sitting working on this, I can't see the little green piece that I can see in this video. So it these little green parts of that faux pine have a way of getting everywhere. So just check around it, use the painter's tape to pick up the extras. Warm. I'm gonna go to your house. 80s. I think this morning here it was like 34 degrees. I walked into the living room and I was like, is there a window open somewhere? It was just frigid. We don't have our heater on yet, so turning the heat on would help, but for that's really cute. It really is really, really cute. It comes together really quickly. It's a lot of fun. Resin does magic on this piece. I can't wait to show what it looks like with resin. I will probably just post a video of the finished piece so that you guys can see it. And I'm just getting out my camera to take a picture and see if anything stands out to me. And in the picture, I could see that there was a couple of little areas where the wreath was a little bit thicker. And of course, my finger dropped an extra piece of that faux pine. But the camera does amazing things for helping you see things that you just don't see in person. I don't know why that works. It's kind of a little magic trick. Be nice to not ever have to use the heater. I love my fireplace. And I did forget, I don't know if they're called bugle beads, maybe. I forgot them initially, so I end up coming back in and adding those. Again, they're just a different variation in the shape, and they just look really pretty on this. on this piece. I'm going to go forward a little bit. I do kind of just fiddle with it a little. Here's those they're kind of a tube bead. Oh, I was trying to find the place in the video where I held it up. There we go. They have a little bit of an iridescence to them that's very pretty. So it just takes a couple, just 4 or 5 of them. Kids have a way of doing that, don't they? This would be a fun piece for you to do. It really does just come together so fast. But I know what you mean. I've been in that and I've been in that position. And even with the puppy, it's timing things so that I can have an hour to do something can be difficult. So that is really it. It's really fun. I hope that you'll do it. If you do this piece, I hope that you come back and comment here and show it to us and let me see what you did. Of course, there's lots of options. I did mine in red and greens. You could do yours in golds and silvers and blues. There's so many different things to do. If you're a selling artist, having some different colors and different varieties would be a great thing to add to your booth. Like I said, I've sold a lot of this design on my Etsy store. It's very popular. The small size is nice because people love to just decorate with just the little pieces. So like I said at the beginning, this wood cutout is available for 5x7 and 8x10, so you could do it a little bit bigger if you wanted. But visit ShellyParkerArt.com and check out our library of classes. You can see the classes that we currently have available, and new classes are posted each month. So I don't know if you could kind of see back behind me, the Christmas stockings piece is the piece that we're working on this month. And next month, we're going to be doing a really cute winter chickadee sitting down in a pile of snow, which I'm really excited to get started on. So there's a link to our Patreon page there. If you'd like to see our other classes, we'd love to have you join us. But I hope you liked this class. I'm going to be coming back tomorrow just to show you how this looks with resin on it. I can't wait to show you. Thank you so much, Connie, for coming to hang out with me.